Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wolf von Laer.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to speak to you because you're one of the biggest groups and actually the biggest pachyderm club in the country. So that is very impressive. Congratulations to you for making that happen. And also, I'm humbled to be able to speak here after so many great speakers that you had. You had legislators here, you have judges here, you will have Larry Reed, one of my idols here. You had Tom Palmer here from the Atlas Network, who's a mentor of mine. And so I feel really privileged to talk to you about some of the work that we do and hopefully make the case to you to look a little bit more optimistic on the state of liberty in the world. But right now you might be confused. You might be confused because why is this random German guy speaking about liberty here in Wichita, Kansas? I might be able to explain that. But you also might be confused because the state at universities in the country is not very good for liberty. Because what we hear from the media and what we're seeing are pictures like this. Berkeley. Has happened a couple of times and it will happen again. We see sentiments like this. We condemn freedom of speech that hurts other people's feelings. The audience here disagrees with that. But this is widespread on American campuses today. And we know this lady that tries to muscle out people who are asking questions about some of the things that they're doing on campus. And she was later let go from the university. And this is what you're seeing. This is what the media reports upon. And universities are failing us in different ways, I would say. They are not producing people who think for themselves. Most of the teachers, and I think there's also data about that, in the sociology department, every third professor is a self-declared Marxist. Every third. And in the social sciences, it's like a little bit better in general, but also not so good. And they sometimes get a little bit indoctrinated. They're not encouraged to think for themselves. And the university system is just getting thousands of students through the classes and they just have to learn the things that they're being taught there and then put it on paper, not to think for themselves. The other thing is that they are very often not teaching economics, which is foundational for an understanding how we have come to be such a prosperous country here or in the West or in many other countries around the world. Remember, just 200, 300 years ago, life expectancy was around 40 years old. And we often died on the fields and we couldn't see our children grow up. And this has all changed because of property rights, economic freedom, the rule of law. And they're often not teaching students real-world skills. Maybe in an engineering degree, maybe in a biology degree. But generally, when students come out of university, many of you are probably business owners. What do you do with these kids? They don't know how to schedule their day. They don't know how to be on time. And they don't know how to maybe give a presentation or do public speaking or any kind of useful skills that we need in a modern economy. And I would like to make the case for hope, and I will go more into detail about that there are many organizations worthwhile, many of them are speaking here, that work towards that. And Students for Liberty is now only 10 years old, but we have built an international movement, which explains my accent. I'm a product of Students for Liberty myself. I used to be a volunteer when I was living in Germany and later in Spain. And there's a hunger for these ideas. You all in this room share the principles, you defend the constitutions, you believe in that. There are people like you, not only in this country, but in hundreds, if not every country. And there's a generation of students who see this and want to make a difference. They take this on, they take leadership positions, and they defend these principles. And they have a lasting impact. They're not only organizing like a book reading club on campus, they're making difference right now as 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So this is just some stuff about the organization, because often I face this problem, like I'm a young guy and I say like, oh, Students for Liberty sounds nice. How many students do you have? Like 3 or 4. But no, we have been founded by 3 or 4 people in a roundtable discussion in 2008 here in the United States. And they organized an event that was taking place for the first time in 2008 at Columbia University. They tried to get all pro-liberty students together and they thought, maybe we get like 20 or 30. But at the end, over 100 people showed up, and they knew that there is a need for that. There's a need for an organization that trains and educates students so that they become more effective on campus, defending these ideas. Now, 10 years later, we have a budget of 4.1 million United States dollars, and some of the supporters of my organization and of the students are sitting in here, and I'm very grateful for that. And we're focusing, even though I have a strange name and a strange accent, we're focusing over 2/3 of our resources on the United States. We were founded here. It's a country where the ideas of liberty fall on fertile ground, and we need to defend it here so it has a rippling effect throughout the world. However, we are also active in 100 countries. And I will tell some of the stories that our students are experiencing in their countries. And we're getting stuff done, and our students getting stuff done. Just in the last 11 months, we had 999 events. I wish I could report 1,000. I could come back next week and would say we have over 1,000 events, but over 43,000 attendees in this country and around the world. Each of these events is tailored about free speech, free markets, environmental policy from a free market angle, whatever the students are interested in, as long as they align with our values. And I have a team of 53 full-time staff members, which is quite a lot. And you might say, like, how can you afford that? I have to admit to you, I'm a ruthless capitalist. And so since we are working internationally, I offshore every job that I can. My IT team is in the Czech Republic, Paraguay, Macedonia, and Ukraine. And they cost as much as 1.25 people in Washington, D.C. And they don't need to be in the US, and so I can get more stuff done with fewer resources so that I can save our resources and the resources that our donors give us. That sounds all nice and well, and what is the goal? We train pro-liberty students to become leaders on campus today. We put them in charge so that they develop leadership skills in the future. And our leadership training is online as well as in person, and they learn communication skills. They learn skills about marketing. They learn how to organize a campus groups, how to be professional, how to dress well. Sometimes we have to talk about that. In order for them to be more effective on campus. And then we give them the opportunity to do things that they want to do. And that can be all kinds of different events. It can be a so-called free speech ball, where you have like a massive beach ball that you roll around on campus and people can share their opinion on this free speech ball so that you have a discourse with other people. It can be a protest in favor of the Second Amendment. It can be a debate about the public debt. Nobody's talking about the public debt anymore. Have you noticed that? 21 trillion United States dollars? Trillion? I mean, that's a different topic, but it's a little bit confusing that this is not the topic anymore these days. But our students sometimes write huge letters to show 21 trillion, how it looks like when it's spelled out, and you have to walk, and I'm bad with your measures, like 50 yards or whatever to see all of the numbers in order to see what the debt is. And that's like activism that they're doing on campus. But also sometimes more creative things. So we had, for instance, at New York University an event where they used art and music to express why free expression and the right for free speech matters. And these are some of the results that you see. Happy human beings with our slogans, looking all good so I can present it to crowds like this. And they come together to talk about the ideas. And at that conference, actually, Matt Kibbe was also there. And I think you also had at some point Jeff Tucker, maybe. He was also at that event and teaching them about the ideas. This is one of our trainings where we brought the top 100 US leaders together to be trained for 4 or 5 days so that they can plan the next year. How many conferences do you want to organize? Like, who's in charge of recruiting, division of labor, all of the things that makes markets effective, we're trying to replicate there. And here, and it's not very visible, this student here, her name is Laer. She is at Harvard University. She is organizing many events there every semester, and she's writing also in the Harvard Crimson and tells Harvard how bad it is on free speech issues. We have a student here from the University of Berkeley. That's very blurry, but he is up here. He has started a group at UC Berkeley. It was very hard to get it approved, but he also later used some other organizations to sue the school because they're so bad on free speech policies. So we are being on the front lines, and we're trying to go to the places that need it the most. So we have a program on historical black colleges and universities, and we're trying to reach out to that demographic as well as the Ivy League schools, because very often they need it the most, but we don't have many principled conservatives at this room or libertarians at these places. More beautiful pictures of people, that's what's happening every day. This is a representation of the 999 events that I was referring to. And keep in mind, this is just in the last 11 months. But, so what? You're organizing events and people talk about liberty. What's the impact? And the so what question, everyone should ask that, especially to nonprofits. What do these numbers stand for? And I hope today I will make the case to you that we should be a little bit more optimistic when I qualify some of these numbers. It is really about the lives that we affect and that we touch. And it's the belief that young people can change the world. The majority of the people who signed the constitutions of the United States of America were below 35 years old. There is a case that young people can make a difference, and it's unfortunate with the lightning here because otherwise you could see them. We have incredible individuals here. His name is Jorge Brassati. He lives now in Florida. He is originally from Venezuela. We have 50 people like him in Venezuela, but he's unique. He's a youth political activist. He does the kind of work you're doing here. He is 21 years old. He has 100,000 followers on Twitter. He has a video series talking about his country. And he's now living in Florida because his parents sent him there because they fear for his life. He cannot go back right now because he has already heard that the regime would put him in prison. His friends protesting with him back in the day, every day, and they're protesting to this day, many of them are in prison right now. And at one of our trainings, I talked with him, and a video came out about Leopoldo Lopez, who is a conservative leader in Venezuela. He is imprisoned by the Maduro regime, and the video came out that he was yelling at his wife from the prison cell that he's being tortured. And I saw that on my Facebook, and I went to him and I saw the pain in his eyes. I was looking at him, and he said, like, my friends are in prison. I'm afraid that they are being tortured right now. And if you see the pain, liberty becomes such a more important quality to you because you really know what it's about. It's not about trigger warnings on campus. Yes, it's an important issue. Yes, we need to tackle that. But our students hear his story. He has been talking at dozens of campuses on the United States, sharing what socialism looks like, sharing what socialism means, sharing that they don't have toilet paper or basic goods. And he's telling his stories in order to qualify like why liberty is worth struggling for. And people become more excited about that and want to become part of Students for Liberty or other pro-liberty organizations because they understand what that means. We also have another student sitting on here. She's in Hong Kong, one of the freest places on earth. Like, why should they worry about liberty? But she was capable of raising $25,000 herself and had an event series about North Korea and what North Korea looks like. A friend of mine, Yeonmi Park, you should get her, by the way, if you ever can. Yeonmi Park, she's a fantastic speaker. She's now a student at Columbia University as well. She fled from the country and she had to cross a desert in order to find liberty. And now she's living in the United States. And she brought the speaker there and talked with many of the Hong Kongese people about that and why liberty matters and why it's worth struggling for. We have another student on there who has organized protests with tens of thousands of people to get rid of, or like to have more fiscal responsibility in his country. And so these individuals from the United States, but also from around the world, inspire one another and show what is possible. Yes, they're sometimes only organizing small events on campus, but they can do so much more. Let's take Savannah Lindquist. I was talking about the dead. That's her, and she's organizing every semester 3 to 4 events on campus, and she's wearing one of our t-shirts which says less Marx, more Mises. It's one of our slogans. Ludwig von Mises, a free market thinker, very important to us. But she's also unique because she's very brave. Is the Me Too movement still going on? Do you remember that? The Me Too movement about like sexual assault on campuses or like in society in general. So she was very brave. She found her voice within Students for Liberty, and she told her story that she was sexually assaulted on campus. And she is a gun-carrying human being, but she's not allowed to carry the gun on campus. So the attack was only possible because she couldn't defend herself. And she has been talking about that issue and is very brave, and it's a very vulnerable subject, of course. And our ATV Washington Examiner, and tomorrow she will be also on CNN talking about that. And again, 21, 20 years old. Also one of our top students here in the United States. And for me, it's very personal. Because SFL has changed my life. I'm working every day for this because I'm a product of the organization. I would not have a fraction of the skills that I have today without the organization. I was studying the thinkers on my own, and I met many people within Students for Liberty who were way smarter than me and educated me on other things, which is important. However, no university program, no internship program would have allowed me to organize events with a team to have like 300 people in Europe. To raise 50,000 euros, which is probably back then was 62,000 United States dollars, to start the first training program in Europe to bring people from all across Europe to talk about the ideas and become better leaders. The organization trusted me to do this and trained me to do this. And for the most part of my life, until then, I felt very insecure. Like I remember sitting in this room, which is the Institute for Economic Affairs, one of the oldest think tanks in the world. I was sitting there surrounded by pro-liberty leaders from Europe and also the United States. Alexander McCobin, he founded the organization in America. I was sitting there, he's my age. He's maybe like 1 month older than I am. And I was listening to him, and I was trained by him, and I said like, why am I here? Like they picked the wrong guy. Like I don't have any of the skills that the people around me had. But I quickly learned that the organization trusted me. And I saw that I can produce value, which is one of the most empowering experiences that I've experienced. And now I'm very driven to make an impact like that on thousands of young people like that as well. And that's the important thing. It's not only talking about the ideas, but give young human beings the capability of growing themselves and pursue their own goals. So this is a student that we just honored 2 weeks ago at our main conference in Washington, D.C. We had 1,300 people there. Steve Forbes was speaking, John Mackey, who's the CEO of Whole Foods, a good defender of the ideas of liberty, and our board member was there. Justin Amash was there, and many other people. But the main thing was that we're really honoring our students. And he won the Student of the Year award. And it's just a very short video.
Student of the Year. Imabo Manirakiza is a member of the African Students for Liberty Executive Board and Regional Director for Eastern Africa. He founded SFL Burundi 2 years ago and was instrumental in founding SFL Rwanda and SFL Democratic Republic of Congo this past year. Imabo organized the first Francophone African events, including more than 30 events in 20 universities in Burundi, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, in addition to organizing the African Great Lakes Regional Conference, which have all attracted over 1,000 students.
One individual in a country where you wouldn't expect it, that the ideas of liberty are present. And you can meet the guy, unfortunately only online, because we tried to get him to our conference because he was one of our top 50 leaders, but his visa was denied and so he couldn't make it. But he's very inspiring, and he even managed, I just heard recently, that he has an own office. He somehow acquired that, we don't pay for that, and he has staff working under him. And he is 22 years old, and he makes a huge difference in his country and surrounding countries. And another example from the United States again, how much influence like a young human being can have if you give them the right conditions to flourish. His name is Ethan Pritchard. He has since then graduated, and his main thing was to bring civil discourse to campuses in the United States, and he did that at the University of Maryland. What he organized is events where we are not only like talking about the constitutions and the First Amendment and why it's important, where probably only conservative or libertarians would probably attend. No, he had a different approach. He invited people from the college Republicans, college Democrats, Black Lives Matter, Students for Democratic Socialism, whatever that is, and brought them all together, and they had a civil discourse about why free speech matters. And many people were inspired by that, and they replicated his efforts. Because fundamentally what I believe right now is there are many opinionated people in society in general and in campuses in particular, but they don't talk to one another anymore. The left thinks the right is evil, the right thinks the left is stupid. We need to overcome that, and that's the reason why we're focusing on issues like that and trying to teach also emotional intelligence to students. He alone brought over 1,000 people as contacts to our database that we can continue to mail and invite to events, and just one individual. And now that contextualizes a little bit of the numbers, because with a $4 million budget, we are putting most of these resources in the hands of the students so that they can do the work. So I don't have to do that. And I've talked about Venezuela before. These are the individuals right now who are mostly busy with trying to get medicine and food for their families, but who also stand up for the ideas of liberty. And this is one of our trainings that took place there. And each time when we have an event there, you have to shift locations a couple of hours before you have the event, because secret police is waiting for you. We also have some funds set aside in our budget to help our students in countries like that. One of Irun is her name. We had to get her out of the country and move her and help her to move to Colombia, because she's a journalist and she asked some questions to the regime during an open hearing. And as a result, she was being threatened that her efforts and her, her American imperialist friends talking about us should go away. And so we had to remove her from that country, and it's really unfortunate that that happens. We also had issues like that in the United States, and I've already talked about this morning on a local TV station, that one of our students, Nicole Sanders, in the Midwest, she handed out the Constitution of the United States of America. But she didn't do it in a dedicated free speech zone. Campus police came and said, like, what you're doing here is illegal, and detained her. But she's a very strong human being, and so she pushed back against that. She wrote about it, she made fun of it, and eventually she sued the school, and so this whole school is now a free speech zone. And so there is struggle out there, but there's also stories of success. And what I find really important about these stories about people struggling in Congo for liberty, for the same ideas. They have the same kind of narratives of oppression and seeking for liberty, that they motivate our American students as well. Because they say, like, look, if like somebody in Congo can do that, I can do that at the University of Kansas. This is another answer to the so what question. Tom Palmer might also have talked about that. This is Kim Kataguri. He's one of our trained leaders in Brazil. He's running this year for the whole Brazilian Senate. He is 24 now, and what he did is YouTube videos. He talked about different economic issues and how insane and corrupt the government is. And he attracted a lot of followers. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were suddenly watching his videos because he made economic sense, because the media and politicians didn't, or teachers. These are the results. He brought, and you can look it up on Wikipedia, so I'm not saying anything wrong here, he brought literally 200,000 people on the streets. Him and like many other people, like Brazil is one of our strongest regions. And the messages were Second Amendment issues, gun defense rights. This is the same slogan that we shamelessly stole from the Brazilians. Less Marx, more Mises. They were against unions, against corruption, against socialism, pro-free market, pro-individual choice, pro-responsibility. And these protests have been going on for weeks and months and have led eventually that the president had need to step down. And many of these people now are in local parliaments. Sometimes they are mayors of their cities, and they continue to affect change that way. One of the students that we had at LibertyCon, our event 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., he runs the biggest group that he has. It's at the Amazon forest. And frequently 500 people show up to like a group meeting. Imagine this year, but 500 people. And some of them take like a boat 300 miles to go to a pro-liberty meeting in the Amazon forest. And they speak on media, they speak out for this, and they make a difference. And I don't claim full responsibility for it. Like the Atlas Network also has trained them, and like many good other organizations as well. But Students for Liberty and Atlas were pivotal for this sort of change. And this is something more close at home. So Eugene Craig, he was a volunteer when I was a volunteer back then, he in the United States, I in Europe. And Eugene and I became friends, and he was always very interested in the political process. And he became the vice chair of the Maryland Republicans. He's an entrepreneur, and he speaks out about mostly also like black issues from a classical liberal conservative point of view, and how these ideas and the Constitution can help that community. And he is one of our success stories, and we are operating now for 10 years. And I hope that you can see now that some of the numbers that are reporting, the lives changed, the people who really become incubated as leaders continue to make a difference in the world. And it shows. We are not very good at like tracking all of our thousands of alumni. I wish we would be better. I don't have dedicated resources for that. But we do know that our alumni have founded 13 nonprofits to this day. 10 of them have grown to a size that they're part of the Atlas Network now, that specializes in training nonprofits. And the Libertarian Christian Institute down in Texas is one example of that, or Young Voices, which helps young conservative and libertarian pundits to get placed in better media outlets. And they get published in the Wall Street Journal and Washington Times and different outlets. We have one of the first people who were involved in Students for Liberty in the United States is now the CEO of a unicorn, meaning a $1 billion valued company in Silicon Valley. Since it's in Silicon Valley, he doesn't want me to use his name. But I will see him probably in 2 weeks. I'm waiting for their IPO. And you might have heard about the 30 under 30 list by Steve Forbes, where they honor 30 individuals which have unique contributions in politics, academia, media, all sorts of tech environments. And we had like 3 people who went to our programs, were part of that here in the United States. Laer Palagashvili, I've worked with her. She used to run many of our webinars back in the day. And she's a teacher and professor at SUNY University. She's a columnist for Washington, for Forbes and other outlets. And she's affecting every year thousands of people because she's teaching Austrian economics and free market economics. And then Jared Meyer and Bobby Suave are authors of several books talking about free speech. He actually has toured for over 10 months campuses in the United States to try to understand what's going on there. So keep your eyes peeled for that. He works for Reason magazine now. So this, I think, hopefully gives you the case for hope. Yes, it's a drop in the bucket, but 10 years ago there was no bucket. There was no organization focusing on students. Now there are plenty of them. I mean, sure, there was educational efforts, and many of the organizations touched my life. It's like the Institute for Main Studies or the Foundation for Economic Education. And education is important, but you also have to put young people in charge and make them better leaders. And this is what makes me so excited about it. Yes, if you look in the daily newspapers, you can be, or you switch on your television, it makes you depressed. But there are a lot of good people that you will not hear about that make a difference for liberty every single day. And they struggle for that. And that set an example for this country and for many other people around the world. And so these are just the results of the last 11 months. And I'm pretty proud of our data gathering capabilities. I'm a little bit nerdy like that with data and so forth. But in the first 10 years, we had 959 events. Now within 11 months, we had like more events like that. And we try to keep growing, try to improving ourselves, trying to improve our students. And with great people like you who defend the ideas of liberties, I think we can make even more strides. So thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Yes, there's a sir in the back.
Yeah. There are about 4.
What's your name, sir?
Rating Hotel. Sprechen Sie Deutsch in Germany.
Ein bisschen.
Basically, there are 4 major religions in the world: the Hindu, Islam, Christian, Buddhism, whatever. But I have not heard where these religions kind of enter into the scheme of things here. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Because religion is huge.
Sure. And I mean, in this country, like the Judeo-Christian tradition is very strong, and you connect that to the ideas of liberty, and that makes sense. But what we have seen in our work is really that the ideas of liberty don't know borders. They don't know sex, they don't know ethnicities or religion. So in the last month we had our first event in Afghanistan. We had 60 people there. And Tom Palmer was speaking over video there, and so was I. They want to learn about these ideas, and I cannot even fathom what kind of conditions they have to face. And this is not I don't make this up. And I haven't said that like anywhere publicly right now, but they had to delay the event for like 2 hours because there was traffic because of a suicide bomber. But these people still came together to talk about these ideas. Yes, we are not very strong in the Middle East, and it's difficult, but it really normally depends on the country and the political economic conditions if we can be active in that. Russia is very tough. China is very tough. And we had people being kicked out of Russia, journalists that have been affiliated with us. And so I'm not necessarily sure if it has so much to do with religion, even though like if the religion in the society is generally like very like tight and people cannot express themselves very openly, it's like harder to learn about Hayek or Milton Friedman or Ayn Rand or these sorts of things. But thanks to the internet, many more people come up with that. But I don't think that there's necessarily a pattern of religion behind that.
Next question over here.
All right.
Thank you for your presentation. It's refreshing. I have a little,
What's your name, sir?
Laer. I have a little scenario to give you to provide some background. Just recently at Genesis Health Club, I met a gentleman that's a socialist, and he proceeded to tell me how great socialism was. And it so happened that, to give you more background, I had driven through Yugoslavia in 1972, met a gentleman that proceeded to tell me how terrible things were, how he hated communism and so forth, and that they had taken everybody's refrigerator and the party decided who should get one. So I related this to this gentleman, and he proceeded to, shall I say, accost me a little bit about how great socialism was, and it was so productive, and he got his education and all his opportunities. And later in the conversation, he also called Russia capitalism. So I set that as a scenario. What would you have responded with for someone of that nature?
Yeah, and you meet these people all the time, especially on campuses, because you know the data that most students these days are looking fairly favorable on democratic socialism and Bernie Sanders. And we have many of the students who used to be Bernie bros are being part of our leadership now because they've realized that you can get to a more equal, a more social just society when you use free markets. And they have understood that because they have looked more into that. The particular problem that you're talking about, it's perennial. And people always say like, oh, Castro was not really socialism, or Venezuela would succeed if you have like higher oil prices, and you feel all of these different excuses. So it is, some people you cannot change their minds, right? Because they just believe what they believe in, and one has to detect if they're open-minded. But generally, it helps us because we have these stories. And I can talk with them about the case of Jorge. And I can teach them like why socialism doesn't work because I happen to have studied that. One beautiful syllogism, and I hope you can remember that, but it's really succinct why socialism cannot work. It's very logical. Socialism means the absence of property rights, right? Without property rights, you cannot have exchange. Because if I don't own my jacket, I cannot switch it with your tie. Without exchange, you cannot establish prices. Because if we don't exchange these goods, we couldn't say that at that given point in time that my jacket is worth your time, or $5 or whatever we decide on. Without prices, you cannot have rational profit and loss calculation. And the business people here in the room and like everyone else who is like at some point have to make a budget for yourself understands that. If you don't know like how much you're earning and how much you're spending, you don't know if you're making a loss or you're making a profit. Therefore, socialism can produce things like tanks, like bridges, and all that kind of stuff, but they never know if it should have produced in the first place. And that leads to capital depreciation, and that explains why everything is run down, and like why Eastern Germany still looks worse than Western Germany, even after pumping so much money into that over decades. And it depends who you're talking to. I don't have like a one-size-fits-all answer. It's part theory, it's part empirical, and it's part like telling the stories of your friend from Yugoslavia. And if you find people that can change their mind, I think they will see that it's not really productive. Most people just believe in socialism or democratic socialism because they have it associated with positive terms like equality and fairness and something that's close to their heart. And fairness, like, we would feel violated in this room if somebody's unfair to us, if like our neighbor gets like a much bigger T-bone steak as we do. our sense of fairness would feel also hurt. But these cannot be like the sole goals. And if we compare means how we can come to like a more dignified and prosperous society, then I think we can convince more people away from that. And we see that because we have the empirical arguments, we have the logical arguments. I mean, you have to look around the world, but you will never able to convince everyone. But what I think is lacking right now also is that we're not talking very much to socialists. Like, invite them. Have a debate with them. Don't boo at them. Like, listen to them and try to understand where they're coming from. Because very often, and let me quote the great Frenchman Frédéric Bastiat here, the worst thing that can happen to a good cause is not that it's skillfully attacked, but ineptly defended. And I think often, like, we don't even listen to the other side. And we're just saying, like, they're evil and they're stupid. And we don't understand where they're coming from. But if you don't understand where the intellectual opponent or the political opponent comes from, how can you defend yourself? So I would encourage folks also trying to read the thinkers on the left. And maybe, for instance, if you want to understand like why free speech is in peril right now, there's an essay called Repressive Tolerance by Herbert Marcuse, a German, of course. Now, he didn't have the best philosophers and thinkers, I guess. And he makes the argument that tolerance and free speech is actually antithetical to helping oppressed groups. And he makes it, unfortunately, logically coherent. It's wrong, it's misguided, but it's logically coherent. And if we don't understand where the new left is coming from, and we don't understand that actually most of the left is also pro-free speech, and we just vilify all of them, then we cannot really form coalitions that can bring about change. But that was a convoluted way to answer your question, I'm sorry.
Next question over here.
All right.
Okay. My name is Paul Wagner. I have basically two questions. One is, because of your international status, I would be interested in how you compare and contrast campuses in Europe versus those in the US as far as on questions of liberty. And then secondly, in the United States, a lot of, at least I perceive, the sort of authoritarian impulses on campuses is driven by what is called identity politics, whether it relates to racial issues or questions of sexuality or even gender, and just how that complicates you guys' work or affects your work.
So two questions. The first is a comparison to campuses. So I would say that the free speech issues are not the same abroad. The US and what's happening here is a unique case. And it might happen in other countries to some extent, but it's not like as strong. We have seen like cases like that in the UK, and recently like a frequent speaker of ours, Jeroen Broek, who's from the Ayn Rand Institute, he spoke at my alma mater at King's College London. And the Antifa came in and they trashed the place and they nearly tried to attack him. And there was a huge backlash in the media, of course. But that happened at my alma mater, where I was indoctrinated from the classical liberal point of view. So it does happen, but to a lesser extent. What we sometimes see at universities in other countries is that they also have problems with free speech, but mostly from the government. Meaning that people that we have in Belarus or in Hungary frequently get detained because they raise critical questions to the government or they go on the streets and protest. And so they face much more severe punishment sometimes for the beliefs that we have and that they have. So it really differs from country to country. There are like many countries which are very hopeful. So for instance, Poland, you can find like a free market Austrian reading club nearly at every university. And you can talk with most of the students about Mises and Hayek and they know who that is. That is wonderful. You also had like the case you had like the mayor of Vilnius, Lithuania, used to be a very strong libertarian. Bordering on not wanting any government at all. So like radical people like that. So there are things happening, but mostly like in smaller countries. I'm also very hopeful about the Eastern Europe and Balkans because we're working with students who are in Macedonia, in Serbia, in Slovenia, Slovakia. They're coming together, they form plans how they can make their respective countries free. And that's the motivation. They come to us because they want to have a freer future for their country and their family. And it's wonderful to see that because their parents' generation shot at each other, right? And that's a wonderful full sign. That's the difference about the international part. And the second question was about identity politics and how that influences us. I would also say it is not only an issue on the left, even though the left focuses a lot on that, But we have to understand that we are very tribal by nature. Like, we are in this group here because we want to find like-minded people. We want to get other viewpoints, but like we want to also feel safe because like so many of around us probably don't feel the same way. We're always looking for community. That's how we survived for millennia. And so what you often see then on campus, the unfortunate pattern is that the left sticks together. They don't want to listen to like other people's thoughts. And then the knee-jerk reaction of some people on the right is then to just offend them, to make fun of them, to feel like moral superior because we defend the constitutions and the First Amendment. And everyone else who is against that is stupid. It's a feeling of self-righteousness. It's same identity politics that's going on there. We, the self-righteous right, we stand up for what is right. And then there's such a lot of yelling going on. And give you an example, CPAC. A couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C., there was a panel about immigration, an issue worth debating, a complicated issue. There was one scholar from the Cato Institute, David Beer is his name, and he spoke about that immigrants in the United States have lower rates of being incarcerated than born Americans. He said that they generally produce $90,000 every year to the GDP. And he presented his arguments with data, and he said it rationally. The reaction on the floor was basically, you don't know what you're talking about, like you should just grow a little bit older, kid, and they were like yelling at him and trying to shout him down. I'm not saying that every white person is that way. I'm not saying every left-wing person is that way. I'm just saying that the same kind of dynamics and the feelings of self-righteousness and group identity we can all fall prone to. And part of my work is exactly that. I want to create a safe haven for classical liberals, libertarians, conservative students. However, I also want them to go out there and change their minds and challenge other people and challenge themselves. That is fundamentally different. And so identity politics is there, and I think it is a very strong motivator of the left in general, but it's not only there.
This will be our last question.
All right.
My name is James Franco. George Pearson would castigate me for asking a question about an election, but I'm going to ask it nevertheless. We hear a lot of commentary on this side of the pond about parallels between Trump and Sanders and the populist movement here and what's going on in Europe with Brexit and some of the different elections. And I'm just interested in your opinion of that as a German, as to whether or not those cultural parallels exist, or are these unique across different countries and cultures across the Western civilization and the West?
Yes, and your question gets to a deep worry of mine. I'm worried that populism becomes too much accepted in this country and in countries in general. And that gets back to the point that I'm also talking about on campuses. People don't talk to one another anymore, right? And Trump is very inflammatory. And he's successful with his strategy. I don't want to talk about like his policies or whatever. But his strategy works. But his strategy is alienating a lot of other people. And he does it deliberately. And if you don't have a conversation anymore between different ideologies within one country, the very fabric of the country goes away. And we have seen this in Latin America over and over again. You cannot talk about politics with your neighbor anymore in many Latin American countries because you're afraid that that will maybe affect your job, or people will talk behind your back because you don't have like the present belief system. So I would be very worried about that, and I think populism is the driver of many of that. Even though I think there's a lot of good things about Brexit, and Daniel Hannan, who's one of the architects of Brexit, he's on our board of advisors, and he makes very sensible points about that. But many voices also use Brexit as like a campaign for fear against like immigrants and so forth. Again, not having a sensible discussion, but just blaming everything on fear. So I think one needs to be careful about that, and we need to talk a little bit more to our neighbors and start with that, because that's very actionable. I'm not sure what to do on a policy level. I don't have a good answer for that. But I talked with George about that very question actually, and he says like, yeah, you don't know your neighbors so much anymore, and you don't talk with them so much anymore. And if you just have your circle of friends who all believe in the same thing, then it's very difficult to keep the society together. And the United States was founded on debate and discourse, and people from different villages, different viewpoints. Similar backgrounds still, but there was a lot of debate and respect for one another. And I feel that is slipping away. The respect for other human beings, even if we disagree with them. And sometimes you cannot talk to people because they just want to yell. I'll not talk about those folks, but generally. And I think that's an issue.
Dr. Wolf von Laer.